Welcome to Structure Fishing. I'm Jim Shell. This is part 6 of the Structure Fishing Workshop, Mapping and Interpretation. But before we begin, let's go over the basic guideline one last time. We said that the home of the fish is deep water. The deep water is a sanctuary he has from changing conditions up above. When the fish is in his deep water sanctuary, he is normally so dormant, so inactive, non-chasing, he's pretty much impossible to catch. But we're saved because the fish don't stay in their deep water sanctuary all the time. They become active once or twice a day and may move towards the shallows. We're saved again because this movement doesn't happen in a haphazard direction. They follow the features of the bottom that we call structure, breaks, and break lines. How far the fish move on structure and how long they stay is determined by the weather and water conditions that are present at that time. So if you and I want to consistently catch fish whenever and wherever we go, we have to control the depth and speed of our lures on that structure. So with that, let's get into the last part of the workshop, mapping and interpretation. Now, what do we mean by mapping and interpretation? It means going out there and finding a structure and mapping it, drawing a picture of that structure, worst case in our head, but better yet, put it on paper and take readings out there. And you give any good structure fisherman a map of a structure, a detailed map of a structure, he'll be able to tell you exactly where the fish are going to be found on that structure, where the contact point is, where the migration route is. And if you get, once you get that map, you can go to that lake over and over again. You can give it to your friend. I mean, you know exactly where those fish are going to be once you have the map. And then interpretation is, once you get the map, you got to interpret where the fish are going to be found on that structure, where the contact point is going to be, where the migration route is going to be. So with that, we're going to talk about mapping interpretation. The tools we need for mapping interpretation: pencil and paper. You got to put it down. You got to write down what you find. It's going to be invaluable to you. You got to have pencil and paper, and as we talked earlier, you know I'm a big fan of markers, and having a marker out there is going to greatly aid you in your mapping process here. And some other aids that will help you in mapping is going to be a good depth finder, and also a good detailed contour map. Navionics, I'm a big fan of Navionics because they make a great product. They make great contour maps. I'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the workshop. All right, so we found a structure that we've caught fish off in the past. We know it's a productive structure, so we want to map this structure. So, I mean, the first question we have to ask us anytime we map a structure is, does it go all the way from the shallows to the deepest water near you're fishing? If it does, it's got a good chance of being a productive structure. In this case here, we know that we have a productive structure, and we may be a little bit familiar with it. If we contour troll the shallows, and we recognize that we've got some definite points and fingers on this bar, we've got our markers thrown out there. And you know, a lot of us can get this far in our mapping without a problem, but a lot of people fall short on putting it on paper. So now you got to get out that paper and pencil that we said we need for mapping. And we've got markers thrown out on these points here. In this example here, we've got points A, B, C, and D. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take our boat over it, look at our depth finder, and see where that break line is. Like, for example, we're going to take the boat on A and we're going to run off that point and write down the depths as they occur to get an idea what it looks like. So we see that a break line at point A goes from 8 feet down to 11 feet, and then it sort of flattens out to 12, 13, 15, 16, 17. We go back on the bar again, go off of point B, see it breaks at 10 feet, and then we write down the depths. It breaks from 10 to 13, then 15, 18, 22, and we do the same thing for point C and point D. We write all this down here. Now we can take a look at this map with all these readings we wrote down on it. Now we have to interpret that map, and we said that the contact point is usually going to be where you've got the deepest water closest to you, where you've got the deepest break and the sharpest break and the longest break. You're not going to find all 3 or 4 of those things happen at one time, but you got to see which finger best fits where these fish are going to come up. And it's typically going to start where you've got the deepest water. So let's take a look. In point D, it breaks off to about 35 feet as the deepest water. point C breaks all the way to 50 feet, point B 22 feet, and point A 17 feet. So more than likely the contact point is going to be on point C, and you can see that it's 12 feet deep, where point D is 11 foot, B is 10 foot, and A is 8 foot. So in this particular case here, if you look at this map you just made, it's pretty obvious to you that the contact point on this structure is going to be point C. So we find the fish not moving and we want to wait for them to come to us. We're going to put that anchor on point C and fan cast that point, and when those fish do become active and move that day, and if they do move up on this bar, they're going to be coming up that finger on point C. But once you make this map and you write down all these depths and you have it, I mean, you're good. I mean, you're set. You can take that map, and every time you go back to that lake and you fish that structure, you know where those fish are going to show up at. Another good thing to help you visualize what the structure looks like at each point here is on point C, we notice it broke from 12 to 15 feet, and you write the depths. What you want to also do is sort of visualize a side profile of what that looks like. It helps you get a better picture and understanding of what that structure looks like. All right, another thing, when you find this structure, you got a good bar here. Another thing to do is take a shoreline sighting. And what you want to do for a shoreline, say before you pick up your markers, you always want to get some kind of reference point. Yeah, you can put a waypoint on each marker, and that will get you really close in the area. But the best way to get you exactly at that spot, if possible, is to get a good shoreline sighting. And what you want to do for a shoreline sighting, you want to try to get a couple of them in different directions, say almost at a 90-degree angle or close to a 90-degree angle. And the best shoreline sightings are when you get two fixed objects that are farthest apart, the more accurate that shoreline sighting is going to be. Like in this picture here, we've got a house and we've got a tree. And as you go by those two objects as you're moving, you'll see them cross like that, and you're right on that bar. You can say, well, okay, you write down, well, the right side of the tree to the left side of this window, and the farther apart those two objects are for a shoreline sighting, the more accurate, exact you're going to be finding that spot. And you'd be amazed once you get a good shoreline sighting. Best shoreline sighting is to get it from two directions. A lot of cases that can't happen, but if you get at least one shoreline sighting and you line up what you wrote down here, that tree to the left side of that window, and you stay on that line and you watch your depth finder, you got your lure out there and you're going right in line with that, you'll hit that spot every single time. Shoreline sightings, very important, will help you greatly if you can get a good set of shoreline sightings. All right, now I want to talk about the first lake that I ever mapped. And want to show you how I made the maps, what they look like, and all that. This is probably a medium-sized reservoir located in central Illinois, medium-small. I think it's around 800 acres roughly. And this goes back to about the early 90s. I want to say 90, oh, actually maybe the mid 93, 4, 5, something like that. I heard that this lake had a lot of muskie stockings as well as other fish, so it had my interest in there. Didn't know anything about the lake. There were no contour maps available for the lake. So I had to map the lake and learn the lake the old way, which is, in my opinion, is probably the best way. Put the lures behind me, start trolling, see if I can find some structure situations. And all the structure situations I found in this lake were located all in the dam area here. As you can see here, I found 3 structure situations marked 1, 2, and 3. So let's take a closer look at the first one. And this is just my presentation lures is just how I described in presentation lures. I trove contour, trove shallows. I realized I've got a structure situation here. I threw out a couple of markers, started making my straight line passes, and I started visualizing, just by my trolling passes, what the rough shape of the structure was. So I took out my pencil and paper and I put it down there, and I probably made 3 separate trips to this lake. And each time I went to the lake, I changed it. I might have been off somewhere or thought I, added some more detail. but I kept on improving the map each time I went out there. And here's my structure map I made of this point of this first structure here. As you can see here, I put down it's a reservoir, so it's got a creek channel, and I just put down for my reference what the creek channel was in this area. So I just knew that, but the short bar point over here close to shore, you can see that the creek channel went up close to the one shoreline here, and it created a very short bar, and there was a I found there was a submerged tree there. It was actually a pretty bad snag. So you find something like that, you want to put that information on the map. It's going to help you, remember that you got a bad snag there, and fish it accordingly. And there was a little cut that came in, and then it made another big point here. And I caught some fish off there. That second point had like a secondary break line. And the main break line was at 15 feet, and the drop off was at 27 feet. And you can see I marked the map anchoring position. Put little dots on there where to anchor the boat, and I wrote down, some muskies, some fish that I caught there. Like I caught a 37-inch muskie in the one spot, and I caught a nice muskie in the other spot. I've caught several muskies on this structure here. Here's a picture of one of those muskies. That's my brother Eddie. First time he went on the lake with me. Once we know the structure, I was familiar with the structure from mapping it, and I would make a trolling pass on to see if any fish were active, what the fish were doing. We didn't catch any fish on the troll, but I had two spots where I knew where to anchor the boat. We threw down the anchor, and I think my brother got this fish on his second or third cast after we put down the anchor. So that's another benefit. Once you get the map and you know the structure, there's no reason to troll it other than to see if they want a fast presentation or just to see if there's any fish on the structure. Like I say, I made one or two trolling passes, didn't locate any fish, so I threw down the anchor, started casting off the one point, and got that fish. All right, now let's take a look at the second structure here. This was this long bar that I found off the point here, going up in a little side feeder channel here. Now this structure, I'll admit, was a little bit, I don't want to say confusing to me, but I would have thought looking at this map here that all these fish would be coming off the end of the bar, but that's not what I found. I spent a lot of time fishing that because I figured that would be the contact point, but it was closer to shore where I was catching all the fish, where they were coming up, and I'm really not sure why I was catching fish in that area and not off the tip, but every time the fish moved on this structure, that's where they were showing up. Here's another friend of mine, Mike. Got a 42, 43-inch muskie off of that structure. Back in 1994, 95 for Illinois, it was a really good muskie, but fish was released. But we got a nice fish off that structure. Now the third structure I found in this lake was probably my favorite bar. It was very close to the dam. And same procedure. I would troll the shallows. I figured I got a structure situation here. I threw out markers. You can see it was a pretty long bar, and at the very end of it, it dropped into the break line there was 15 feet, I think, down to about 30 feet. And I found a couple little points off of the bar. They weren't very well pronounced, but they were a little bit points. And I caught bass up a little shallower. Plus I caught bass at the tip of the point. And I've caught several muskies at the end of the point. And you want to add information on these maps. Like in my case, there was another big brush pile or tree down close to the end of this point. And I actually went back here in the fall and went crappie fishing because I suspected that this would be a good crappie spot, and it was. There was a lot of crappies on that structure too. And you can see I put down at the end of the bar, anchor and cast. You can see where I caught a 22-inch bass, and at the tip of that structure I caught a 5 3/4 pound bass and some muskies, 37, 38-inch muskies there. But this is how our maps want to be. Look at that map. It's nothing fancy, but every time I went to that lake, I knew what that structure looked like, and I knew that I was going to concentrate at the end and check out those points a little bit closer there. I wrote down my depths. I knew how it broke, how sharp it broke, and I knew where to spend all my time on this structure. Here's my friend Bob when I went out there with him. That's one of the nice bass that came off that structure. And on that same trip, we got a really nice muskie off that structure. And there's my friend Mike. I think that was his biggest bass I think that he might have caught up to that point. That was right around a 6-pounder. But I've got the map of this lake here, and every time I go back, I could add a little more detail if I find something there that I missed. But with those maps in hand, that's all I need when I fish that lake are those 3 maps. All right, now let's take a look at some other maps here. One of the best guys at making a map, that was a huge student in Buck Perry's that also taught structure fishing, was Terry OMalley. Buck Perry said it himself that Terry OMalley was the best mapper he has ever seen. And I want to share with you some of the maps that Terry made. And keep in mind, when Terry OMalley made these maps were made, I believe, in the mid to late 60s. It was, I believe he had flash or depth finders then, but he was using his spoon plug. As we said in presentation lures, how valuable a spoon plug is, and a spoon plug is going to help you map. And Terry did all of his mapping with a flasher unit and a spoon plug, but the spoon plug did probably 90% of the mapping for him. And these are the maps that Terry generated back in the mid-late to late 60s. Let's take a look at some of these maps. You can see that he's got the break line, and every little point or finger off the break line, you write down your depth just so you can see how it breaks. And write down some information here. You can see what Terry wrote down here. Well, first, he's got a little map telling you where he's at. The dam is on your left. Moon Valley is to the top, and to the right of the page is a car ferry, and this is Lake Wisconsin, if some of you guys may be familiar with that. But he wrote information on here, like big walleye, early June off the 1 point over here. Most of the bar can be bumped, not much brush. Walleyes come up here, and white bass. He even wrote, run a 200 spoon plug or a 100 series spoon plug. But you got that map, you know where the break line is, and you know where the fish come up on that break line. Let's take a look at some more maps. Here's another Lake Terry map in southern Wisconsin, Lake Tishigan. Again, you got some great information on this map here. You can see that he's got a big bar shown here. You got the depths. There's a hump on top of the crown of the edge of this bar here. He's got the depths wrote in there. He's got what the bottom is. You can see hard bottom with rocks. Note 15-foot break. He's got notes about the bass and the northerns, where they come up. And he even has a reference on here for a shoreline sighting. He's got markings of a evergreen tree between last 2 windows will put you on the hump. He even wrote down what his shoreline sighting was over there. He wrote down, you can see what the weeds were at the time he mapped this lake. Weeds down to 7 feet. Unfortunately, the weeds are probably about 15 feet now, but this is how you want your maps to look and the kind of information you want to write down on your maps. And like, put it on paper, and don't be afraid. I mean, you'll find, like I did when I mapped Otter Lake. Each time I went there, I might show it a little differently. Another question, a lot of people ask me, well, it's not to scale. How do I know I'm drawing it to scale? Don't worry about drawing to the scale. You just want to put down the general shape on it. When you're fishing it, as long as you know what that general shape is, you know that, okay, it's going to turn over here. I'm going to find a finger over here. You can change the scale on that a little bit later. Matter of fact, I got some examples of this coming up in a little bit here. Let's take a look at another map that Terry made. This is the same lake, Lake Tishigan. This is like the other end of it here, but you can see that he's got the break line shown around this area here. You can see that you got a bar that comes out. Again, he's got the weeds marked down here. Weeds is 6 feet. He's showing that it's a hard bottom at the end of this bar here. He even's got a note here: hard bottom sharp breaks at 13 feet. Bass and northerns and some walleye. He's got a little circle showing where the deepest water in the area is. He's got all the depths coming off of each bar, so you know how sharp it breaks. You know, this is the kind of information you want to put on your maps. All right, now like I said earlier, the most ideal contact point is going to be the deepest, sharpest, longest, and narrowest break into the deepest water in the area. Ideally, if all these things, most of the time you'd be surprised that these things all do come together, but sometimes they don't. Let's take a look at this drawing here and let's interpret it now. So we've got a bar here with four fingers coming off of it. One breaks 14 feet to 22 feet, and you can see it gradually goes to 26 feet, and we got another one breaking 16 to 24, gradually goes to 34 feet. We've got another one goes 17 to 25, and it gradually breaks to 36 feet, and the other one there 15 to 22, gradually breaks to 28 feet. Now I made this one pretty obvious that our deepest break is 17 feet, our sharpest break 17 to 25, that breaks 8 feet, and that it's the longest break, that bar, that point's the longest point out of the other ones, and it's the narrowest one. I mean, this is a classic contact point you want to look for here. Let's take a look at another example here. This will be the last one we're looking at. I don't want to tie up a lot of time looking at these, but now we've got a bar here, A, B, C, and D. Now take a look. You know what? Just pause the tape. Take a look at this. Pause the tape. Then I'm going to ask you where you think the contact point. If you're fishing this bar here, where are you going to spend your time fishing? Okay, now after you guys looked at that, how many of you said B? Because that's the right one. B, you got the deepest water off of B at 22 feet. It breaks, they all break, well, A, B, and C all break at 11 feet, but B breaks down to 17 feet. In this case here, it's going to be B. But once again, because B is the contact point, but we're still going to check the other fingers. We're still going to check A, C, and D when we fish this, because you have fish maybe showing up on the other fingers as well. But the bulk of the fish, or if we're out there looking to make the biggest catch, we're going to mostly concentrate on point B, but we're also going to check out the other fingers because you will have fish showing up on the other fingers there too. Now let's talk about some aids that we have out there. Contour maps. Let's talk about contour maps. Contour maps will greatly aid you into getting out on the water and putting you in the right spot. And my favorite company for contour maps, without a doubt, is Navionics. And you can go to navionics.com and view all of their maps that they have. I mean, before you go out and you buy their chip or buy their maps for your depth finder, you can go on navionics.com for free and look at all the maps, and you know exactly what you're getting. I have spent hours and hours on my computer at home looking at all the maps on Navionics, looking for new places to fish and doing my homework before I get out on the water. Anytime you're fishing a new lake, you want to take a look at the map, study it. I mean, there's so much homework to do before you get on the water. I always take a look at the Navionics map, you know, print it out or sections of it out, you know, where I want to fish, like in the spring. For example, when I fished DeGray Lake last year, Memorial Day, I decided to go there, didn't research the lake ahead of time. And the night before I was going there, I took a look at the map, and I realized, well, it's spring, I probably want to fish towards the headwaters. I'm probably going to have better watercolor towards the headwaters. So I took a look and see what kind of structure situations I have in the headwaters. And we went out there, and it ended up being a fantastic trip we had. Fortunately, we found the fish moving. We were catching hybrid stripers, and it was a great trip. But you want to get your homework before you get on the water. In Navionic maps, you can just browse through here and look at all these kind of maps. Word of warning though, here's a lake I fish in Canada, and not all HD maps are really HD, even though they say they're HD. Here's a lake I fish in Canada called Red Lake, and it's 5 foot, or actually I think 10 foot contours. It gives you a rough idea where you've got some structures. And I was pretty excited a couple years ago when I saw that they offer this as an HD map. But it's not a true HD map. You got to be careful. Some HD maps, or most HD maps on Navionics, are true HD maps, or they map them out there. But they take some of the regular maps and they interpolate the data to make it look like an HD map. Well, in this interpolation, they're just guessing what's in between the contours, and then you'll have a map that originally looked like this, and they'll interpolate the data, and you get something like that. Well, no, that's not an accurate HD map. And I think when you look at their website and you look at these HD maps, you can just tell it doesn't look natural. When you see a map like that, you can tell it was a interpolated map and not a true HD map. All right, now, but it's a great website. Like I said, you can spend hours and hours on it. Every time you're going to a new lake, you got to do your homework and look out there and study these maps, print them out, and you have to make a distinction between trolling water and fishing water. I don't think we've talked about this in the workshop yet. Perfect time to bring it up here. Buck says when we're on the water, we have to just look at a map before we get on the water and classify it as trolling water and fishing water. And what Buck means by that, if it doesn't look like there's any structure situations on the map, we're going to call it trolling water, which means we're just going to check it trolling. And if we find something differently, if we do find that they missed a structure or there's more there, and we catch fish, or we find a structure situation, then it turns into fishing water. All right, now here's a map in Madison, Kaganza, where I've got marked up. Looking at the map here, where looks like we have a structure situation, we're going to call that fishing water. And once again, when we call it fishing water, that means that we're going to do the full presentation of lures. We're going to troll the shallow, cast the shallows, troll deep water, and cast deep water. When we have fishing water, it's a structure situation, and we're going to cover the water thoroughly. And if you can see areas that I've got marked on this map as trolling water, that means there's really no known structure situation shown on there, and we're just going to say we're fishing one spot, and instead of going over it, shooting over to the next spot, we're going to troll there, see if there's anything in between that spot there. Most of the time it is just trolling water, but you'd be surprised that in some cases you'll find a structure situation, a structure that was missed when they mapped the lake. So when you look at this lake, and you're going to do your own interpretation, you got to figure out, okay, what am I going to classify as fishing water, and what am I going to classify as trolling water? All right, now I think with these HD maps, I mean, it's almost a game changer, or I should say to a person that understands structure and knows structure, because honestly, I think 90-95% of the people out there don't have a clue what structure really is, as we talked about earlier in the structure portion of the workshop. But for those of you that are real structure fishermen, you can take one of these HD maps, and here's a map of Rathbound Lake, and I fished this lake, and the mapping job they did in this lake was pretty good. All the areas I fished, the contour map that they made was very accurate. So what you can do in a situation like this, I know that this is a fishing situation here. I've got a good structure situation here. So what I can do, I can print out this map, and I can sort of pretty much write down where that break line is by looking at that HD map. Then I can go out on the water after I make this, and I can write my depths on it. I can verify that this map is pretty accurate, which it is, and then I can put my markers on all those 3 or 4 points there, and then I can write down the actual depths I find out there. And then this is what I'm left with. And this is all I need when I go back and I fish that structure now. I know where that break line is, and I know where the points are, and I've got my depths there, and I know where it's going to break deepest. I know where those fish are going to come up here. I know where to spend my time here. So I went from this map to this map as being my structure map here, my fishing map. This is how I mapped and interpret this area here. All right, another great tool to help you interpret areas is Google Earth. If you're fishing a smaller lakes, or a lake that wasn't mapped, or there's very little information on the internet on, look at it on Google Earth. Here's a lake in southern Wisconsin, and I can see very distinctly where the weed line is. This picture was taken probably in the middle of the summer. Not every lake weedy lake is gonna, the weed line is gonna show up if the picture was taken in the winter. But luckily, this picture that I on here was probably taken in the summer, and I can see a distinct weed line on here. What I can also do is I can go to Google Earth and put waypoints on there and transfer those waypoints on Google Earth to my depth finder. I'll put a link down below. I made a tutorial on that about a year ago. The link's down below. You guys want to watch that. Well, Google Earth is another great tool. We got all this new technology that is for a structure fisherman can really aid us. We got Google Earth, and this is the latest thing that's been relatively new within the last 5 years. We have electronics now, depth finders, that can create high definition contour maps while we're fishing. And someone that understands structure and knows structures, boy, it's almost a game changer in my opinion. There's companies like Humminbird that has this on their units. I'm not too familiar with Humminbird, but I'm sure it's a great product. What I am familiar with, the unit I use, is this Garmin unit, EchoMap. Between the two, I mean, Humminbird is great, but like I say, I prefer Garmin because I think it's more reasonably priced than Humminbird. But the other thing is also, as I told you how much I love Navionic maps, Garmin bought Navionics recently, and I think they're in the process of having all their units compatible with Navionic maps. But with my Garmin unit, I can go out on the water and I can turn on this feature called Quick Draw, where it's going to make a contour map. Now, when I find a structured situation while I'm fishing, well, of course, I'm going to make, as I'm fishing it, I'm going back and forth, it's collecting the data and it's making me an accurate, detailed contour map. And the more passes you make on it, the more data you get, the higher quality, accurate contour map you get. But boy, you give any structure fisherman an accurate contour map, you can look at it, you can make your interpretation and know exactly where those fish are coming up. Now, this doesn't replace the mapping process. What I mean by that is you find a good structure on here, it's always good to still put it on paper and pencil and draw that structure in, write down your depths on there, because that's the ultimate key you want to have, is that map there. But once again, you get an accurate contour map, it's going to really aid you in making those final interpretations and help you make that final structure map. Another device you have is Vexilar makes a unit sonar phone thing where you can Wi-Fi directly to your phone or tablet with an avionics app and create contour maps as you fish as well too. All right, now that pretty much wraps up the workshop. A lot of people have trouble when they go out there and they're looking for a little bit of confidence or something to take them over that, you know, that hurdle or whatever. There's two great structure fishermen that are out there that will guide you out there, or I should say give you on the water instruction if you're looking to take your fishing further to the next step or you find yourself in a rut. That's Jerry Borst and John Bales. Got their contact information up there. Feel free to give those guys, drop them an email or give them a call. Jerry lives in the northern Illinois area and John lives in central Indiana. And they're both great educators, teachers. They'll help you if you guys need any additional on-the-water help in this whole process here. So that wraps up the structure fishing workshop. Hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. Don't forget to leave any comments, any questions you have. I'm probably going to do a part 7 of this workshop that I'm going to title Final Thoughts and Things That I may have forgotten or things I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. So thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.